I don't know about you guys, but I want to live where Chris lives. What a way to grow up. Hi, I'm Rex Parris. I'm the mayor of Lancaster, and I want to tell you the story of the last 8 years. 9 years ago, I got elected to the mayor's office, and I didn't really have any government experience before that. The kids left home, and I had some extra money to throw into a campaign, and next thing I know, I'm mayor. Really, that's pretty much what happened. And I actually thought, because the state senator told me, who I was friends with, that climate change was just a conspiracy. I mean, what Trump is still saying, he told me that, so I just assumed that was right. What do I know? And then I met Bill, what was his name, Mark? The guy at eSolar, Bill Gross, has Idea Lab, and he had built a facility to have mirrors get the boiler going and produce electricity. And it was the state-of-the-art facility at the time, and he was able to produce electricity down to, I think, 14 cents a kilowatt, which with subsidies, he was able to do that. And, he was expecting to build huge fields. And then the price of PV dropped. And now we've got all these mirrors sitting out in a field. But in the course of doing that, I started researching climate change. And realized that perhaps Mr. Trump was wrong. And the more I learned, and the more frightening it was, and the more I realized that the 5 grandchildren I have will probably not have a normal lifespan. Probably not. I mean, that's how bad it is. And I used to always, this is the last time I'll use this slide on a presentation. But, if a meteor or an asteroid was coming at us, the world would have united decades ago. We would have found a way to deflect it. We'd have all had a unity of purpose. And I used to think that it was because we could see it, and you can't see climate change. But as I see islands disappear and 60 million people displaced, I realize that's not it. Now, one of my hobbies is neurocognitive science, and so I'm also a trial lawyer. And I have a blog called Trial by Science. And one of the things I do is interview cognitive scientists and put it on the blog. So last week I'm interviewing Sapolsky out of Stanford. Incredible guy. He's so smart, he gets to run around without ever having a haircut or shaving his beard. Incredibly smart. And he just wrote a book, Behave, the biology of why we behave and how we do it. And so I asked him, okay, give me something I can give the lawyers on how to increase the size of their verdicts. That's really why I was talking to him. And he said, well, I can tell you what they should stop doing. And they should stop trying to make the jury cry. They should stop trying to increase the empathy that's coming from the jury. Now, that's really counterintuitive when you think about it. I mean, I've spent 35 years trying to get you to know trying to learn how to get you to cry. But he said, the studies are really robust. The more empathetic we become, the more painful it is. And the more likely we are to turn away and not do anything to fix it. Doesn't that make sense with what we're doing with climate change? Because half the country's turned away. Half the country doesn't want to listen to something that is so abundantly obvious now. I mean, half the country can't be mentally challenged, can they? But I think the contemplation of thinking about your grandchildren not surviving is painful. And you're looking for a port in the storm. And somebody who comes along offers it to you, you take it. Fortunately, it does mean everything comes to an end if we don't fix this. So I want to tell you the upside of it, right? And it was an accident. The reason the city got so involved in climate change was the meteor, death and destruction and doom. But in the course of getting involved in it, we'd meet with Edison. I'm sorry if Edison is here. They've gotten much better. But 9 years ago, it was little stuff like, I'd like to switch the street lights to LED, right? Well, we're going to have a study, and it's going to take 10 years to change the street lights. The frustration was just enormous. I was pulling my hair out with them. So we just decided to start making our own decisions. Probably should have used that slide earlier, but you've already heard this. 4%, 20%. But if you were to actually calculate the cost, who warmed up the ocean? It wasn't the industrialized world, it was us. Make no mistake about that. Us. When you add the last 100 years of the carbon that was poured into that atmosphere, that warmed those oceans, that may be the end of us, it was the United States that did that. We have an obligation to fix it because we can. We can. And not only can we fix it, if you're the mayor, you can get reelected with 78% of the vote. Really. But Lancaster is the most conservative city in California, I would venture to guess. I'm a Republican. But the people who vote for me, they're really Republican. Trump did very well in that election. And we're only 160,000 people, and we're out in the desert. And the ills that we have, when I got elected, we had a higher crime rate than Compton. We had a higher gang murder rate than Compton. Now it's, in 2 years we were able to wipe it out. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that too. But we were the least likely city to be able to accomplish what I'm going to tell you about. The least likely. And certainly shouldn't have had the voter support that we have. But it benefits them in so many, many, many ways. There's a synesthesic effect to it that is I can't articulate what it has done to our city just going after climate change. And it started first with solar panels, obviously. We were the first city to pretty well, I think we hit 97% of all the city buildings were renewable. That was 9 years ago, wasn't it? Now, this is Jason, our assistant city manager. I want to tell you this story because you got to recognize this is fast changing. What's true today is not true tomorrow. What hydrogen is going to do to this equation, I don't know. It's so fast because Jason put us into 15-year contracts for all of our power needs at 15 cents a kilowatt. It was amazing. He was a hero for a very short period of time. In the course of doing this, one of the things we should recognize is that the more we can do things globally, the more we can merge companies globally, you increase the diversity of the group. The science behind that is robust. The more diverse the group, the greater the accomplishments. And so I made a lot of trips to China, met with BYD, because they were saying they were going to come build cars, actually. They ended up building buses, but that's okay. Every city on the West Coast was trying to get them to come to their city. We got them to come to Lancaster. And what they say, what Stella, that's the president of BYD America, says, it wasn't because I was asking her to come. It was because every time I talked to her, I was talking to her about the technology. One of the things we did was I got her to meet with KB Homes. KB Homes at the time was really in trouble. I didn't know it at the time. But what I asked them to do was create a home that was net zero. And this is, I'll never forget it. And I hadn't been there very long either. So, you know, I'm in that big office, that big conference room, trying to act like I know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. And they're telling me it can't be done. It can't be done. Well, anybody could do it, but it's going to cost $1 million. Make it affordable for the average American to buy it. Can't be done. I said, well, I'll waive all permit fees. That got their interest a little bit. And then I'm saying, well, would you at least try? And I'm going, what are you afraid of? What's your obstacle here? You know what the obstacle was? How long is it going to take to permit it? Think about it. Builders, they tie up all that money while government's screwing around, you know? So I looked at my watch and I said, how long do you want it to take? And that started us on a whole new way of doing business when it's alternative energy. We were the first city in the country that solar panels or wind, you know, turbines for that matter, they don't do too much of that, over the counter. You know, I mean, let's be realistic. My building guys don't know anything about solar, especially back then, you know? I mean, who are we kidding here? Over the counter. First city to do that. They finally agreed they would try. And so later, Stella and I got to be really good friends, and she tells me, you know, I was kind of patronizing you. I didn't think this was ever going to come to fruition. But when they made the agreement, now I'm on the phone. Where's the solar panels? Where's the LED lighting? Where's this? Where's that? You know? Pretty soon they started producing it. 4 months later, that's her and I turning on the first net zero house that was affordable, that any American could buy who could afford a regular home, and it'll also charge your car. Now that was 8 years ago. 8 years ago when we did this, you'd be going, ah, oh, that's how far we've come, you know? What's the big deal? But now, from that, you know how everybody's talking about how we make the switch? I'll tell you how you make the switch. You have your mayor and city council pass an ordinance. The first thing I did was every house has to have solar panels on it. 1 kilowatt, that's all. But, you know, there's kind of a little method to that. You put in the you know, the inverter and all that for 1 kilowatt. Might as well put 6 up there or 4 up there. You know, you just get them started on that process. 2 months ago, 3 months ago, we passed the ordinance that every new construction has to be net zero, has to be able to come off the grid. But the reason why that's so popular there, because believe me, that 79%, they don't think climate change is real yet, even now. They kind of think their mayor's a little nutty, but you can add another bedroom to the size of a house you buy if it's a net zero house when you do the calculation, right? It's that much of a savings. But we have to change the way we think because, you know, you think about this is the mortgage payment. You don't think about this is the mortgage payment plus the utility bill. You know, that's a separate category. You've got to get people thinking about what's the total package. Then it makes nothing but, I mean, you'd have to be a dummy not to want a net zero house. It's just such a better deal. Oh, and I also announced we were going to be the first net zero city in America, well, actually the world, is what I announced. Everybody thought I was nuts. I think we made it this year. Didn't we? Yeah, good. You know. but let me tell you a little secret. I had no idea what I was talking about. Just seemed to me we ought to be able to do it. I didn't have the science behind it, but I did know this, that I've got the greatest grandkids you've ever seen. They really are. One of them is so phenomenally smart, it's wicked. And if I didn't do everything necessary to try to save their life, because that's what we're talking about, how do I sleep? You know, how am I worth anything? That's really what we're facing today. But that process that I told you about with BYD and the house and all that got their chairman's interest. And next thing I know, they announced the bus factory was going to be in Lancaster. We build the best bus you could possibly buy. And that, bar none, you know. That bus there, we designed in Lancaster. Yeah, right there. This is normally, an articulated bus is something you use for short urban hops, right? You see them downtown. But think about it, electric. What does an articulated bus give you? More batteries. That goes 70 miles downtown from the center of Lancaster to LA, 70 miles back. We don't have to charge it till we get back. But we've got a charger with us. The bus takes with you, just in case there's a problem. Now they just announced last week where the bus just pulls up and, you know, something makes a charge. I'm not quite sure. But one of the things you have to be aware of when you're doing all this great stuff, you got to remember who you're talking to. With trial lawyers, when we teach trial lawyers, we say, you know, if you're talking to Russians, you better learn Russian, right? You have to know the language that your audience is speaking. What's important to them? When they went out to sell this to cities, it makes nothing but sense to buy this bus. When the bus finally falls apart, you can pull those batteries out and put them on your grid storage units, you know. If there's an earthquake, you can pull that bus into the hospital and power the hospital if you have it set up beforehand. But you can buy a regular bus for a lot less money. And so the boards that make those decisions, they don't want any part of it. Because we think in columns. Fuel cost is a separate column. When you factor in the fuel cost, that bus is far cheaper. But we don't have the ability within our systems to do that. So we fixed it. You know how we fixed it? You buy the bus, we'll rent you the batteries. Okay? We lease the batteries to them. Now they can access the fuel column. You got to get real creative in how you deal with government, because it takes so long for government to change anything. 2 minutes, they told me I could talk as long as I wanted. All right. So, once everybody got jazzed up about what we were doing, about being the first net zero city, once that vision started becoming shared, we started, meaning the city staff, started looking for ways to make great things happen. Remember the meeting with Edison? I mean, I really had to threaten to red tag their polls just to get, imagine meeting with a bunch of Edison executives and look over at the building and safety guy and say, can I red tag their polls? I mean, they'd have to shut down the power grid. It took that. Now it doesn't. Now they work with us and everything. One of the things they worked with us was we bought all the streetlights. For the cost of maintaining streetlights that we were paying them, we could replace them, put LED in, put a centralized control system in so that if there's an emergency, we can light exit paths. We can make a neighborhood go dark for a police operation. We can put cameras up on them if we want to put somebody under surveillance. And I know for the liberals in the room that's a little uncomfortable, but wait till you have 160,000 people you got to keep safe. You know, there's a balancing effect. All these things you could do because the staff started getting really creative into how we dealt with energy. Which brings me to community choice aggregates. I think we were the first city. Marin got there first, but the city, we were the first city. We have a 94% opt-in. 94%. That means 94% have opted in, and it's all renewable. And the reason is not because they believe what their crazy mayor believes about climate change. They really still think I'm crazy. But every single person, minimum savings is 4.6%. That's what you get with a community aggregate. We didn't know how to do it. The staff just figured it out. Went and got approval. Now some of the decision makers, I guess, are in the room where hopefully they approve it. Or have they already approved that, or is there something else they're approving now? Okay. But it took 3 years to figure it out. I mean, think about what it takes. You're going to start your own power company, essentially. You know, you're going to buy and sell power. One time, one of the business journals called me up and said, well, aren't you worried about the risk? It never occurred to me. Now, maybe that's poor leadership, but I really don't think so. What I think is, well, I don't. I think we're talking about the destruction of our planet. How could there be too much risk? In anything I do. You know, if it makes remote sense, we have to act. So I just really haven't paid attention to the risk. Now, other than Jason, we got a really smart staff. And so now we buy and sell the power everybody uses. And what they also did is that instead of other cities having to go through this learning process, we'll do it for you. We'll do it for your city until they're ready to break off on their own. But you can be up and running with a community choice aggregate by working with the city of Lancaster. 1 year, you're up and running. It took us a lot longer than that. You know, before I deal with Mr. Trump, what I'm absolutely convinced of, this problem could be solvable today, just with and you know, we've all heard it, the energy we waste. You know, if Google and Apple and all got into the process and started measuring and controlling and dealing with how we used energy, we'd cut it in half tomorrow. That's without having to do any of this. All they need is the will to do it, and government recognizing how long do you want it to take. That really has to be the answer on this. It's every bit as important as World War II was in the war effort. Every bit. And we cannot afford in any way to delay it. Now, when Mr. Trump came in, and I know Rick Perry, and he made Rick Perry head of energy. I mean, Rick Perry's a nice guy, don't get me wrong. But his thoughts about all this are very much different than mine. And is really not who you want in energy. And to say nothing of that guy from Oklahoma that now has the EPA. And it would be very easy to pull your hair out, to give up, to think, oh my. And I did. You know, first couple of months, it was like, it's over now. Might as well have a party. You know? I mean, there really is an apocalyptic sense to all this. But then I remembered something. And you should remember this too. Trump does not issue building permits. I do.